Alright guys, girls, and everyone in between, this is Social Tedia, and you're watching my review of The Matrix Resurrections. So first off in this review, I'm going to break down the plot of The Matrix Resurrections, and then I'm going to go into the hidden meanings and my specific review of it. So this is the synopsis of The Matrix Resurrections. I'm doing it from the timeline of The Matrix itself rather than in the timeline of the film. So it starts off at the end of The Matrix Revolutions, when Neo has won, the machines have lost the war, and everything seems to have gone happily ever after. However, the Matrix is now losing power because some of the humans are leaving it. And there's a war with the machines where some parts of the machines are still in the war, and some parts of the machines are wanting to live in the peace. And so they start a war within themselves. And the Matrix itself gets rebooted. Eventually a new program called the Analyst comes up with an idea. He'll save Neo's body from the Matrix Revolutions and plug him back into the Matrix as Thomas Anderson and start again. He runs a few experiments with Neo and Trinity, and he discovers that something magical happens when they meet. There's a big surge of energy. However, this doesn't last forever. So he comes up with a new theory. He discovers that if you put Neo and Trinity into a close proximity with each other, but never actually meet, you get a constant flow of energy, because their desire to connect is strong, but it's stronger when they never actually do connect. So Thomas Anderson is placed within a company called Binary, creating a video game series called The Matrix, based on his true life as Neo, but under the mask of a delusion, which he discusses with his therapist, the Analyst, who attempts to gaslight him into believing that it's all a mental illness. Eventually, Thomas Anderson attempts to jump off a roof. This is witnessed by Bugs, who then is unplugged from the Matrix and sets about trying to release him after she realises that his video game The Matrix is true. On another psychotic episode, Thomas Anderson uses the program of The Matrix in his Binary company to create a model of the first scene of The Matrix, with a new casting for the Trinity character, and Smith and Morpheus being combined into a new character. Watching this, Bugs plugs herself back into the Matrix and tries to take out Morpheus from this model. With the help of the new Morpheus, Bugs manages to unplug Neo and bring him back into the real world. The real world is not quite the way that he remembers it. Rather than the human colony in Zion, they now live in Io, led by a now older Niobe from the first trilogy. They are able to live in harmony and create a more functional world together than either of them had separately. Neo forms a plan to save Trinity against Niobe's wishes. Of course, being unplugged, the machines know this will happen, and they attempt to kill Trinity. However, the Analyst has a better idea. He knows that Neo won't risk killing Trinity, so he comes up with a plan. He will offer Neo a chance to re-enter the Matrix, otherwise Trinity will die. However, Neo has his own ideas. He tells the Analyst that he will ask Trinity to unplug herself from the Matrix. Should she agree, they both leave, and should she not agree, they both get plugged back in. Were this deal to be broken by either of the pair, they will both be killed. And so enters the final conflict of The Matrix Resurrections. Now, to review this story, I first want to bring in the metaphors of the story. I should begin by saying this is all by my personal perspective. I'm not saying that Lana Wachowski or any of the filmmakers came up with these ideas. I'm just saying this is how I personally received the story. This was my subjective reception of the storyline. So first, I want to break down the character duality. The story of The Matrix is always about pairings, about binaries, and this is even mentioned in the story itself.
I've been thinking about us, Tom. About binaries that form the nature of things. Light and dark. Choice in its absence. Anderson and Smith.
And this story runs on them more than any other, but more in a fourth wall way, as most of the story does. It's a duality between the fictional characters and the real-life stories of the actual Matrix trilogy. The first character duality I saw was Neo and Lana. Firstly, in the original Matrix trilogy, Neo was a story about the Wachowski siblings putting themselves in a story about being able to be more than their human bodies allowed them to be. That is partly my observation, and that is partly what the Wachowskis have said. And in this story, it is more than ever about Neo being Lana Wachowski putting herself into the storyline.
Did you base your main character on yourself?
There is a lot of me in it. Maybe a little too much.
Even pointed out by the Matrix trilogy of video games being written by Neo, just as Lana Wachowski wrote the trilogy of Matrix films. Trinity I saw as a combination of Trinity and Neo, in the sense that she is now the lead of the story. She essentially is the Neo in the first trilogy. And also she has more that transgender side of her, which Neo inhabits, which she didn't have in the first trilogy. Bugs, I believe, is a combination of Bugs herself, which in a way is Trinity from the first film, but she's also the fandom. She talks to Neo as if the fandom of the first Matrix is talking to Lana. And in a way, she's kind of the kid in the first Matrix trilogy, in that he is also, in some way, the fandom of the films. That is the most obvious character duality of the Morpheus and Smith duality, with Morpheus in this version playing Smith in the modal that Anderson creates. And finally, in relation to the capitalism metaphor that I'll go into later, Smith is obviously a character duality of Warner Brothers. This is quite obvious in the storyline because he actually says our parent company Warner Brothers is asking us to make a fourth Matrix video game, and Smith is the one who pushes the psychotic moments by pushing this game, which is what Warner Brothers did to Lana Wachowski. And similarly, the Analyst is about the world of capitalism in general, just as all the characters really were in the first trilogy. The Analyst is the world gaslighting capitalism and transgenderism and anything in general that you would consider the capitalist world lying about for its own improvement. So now I'm going to cover my first of the metaphors in the Matrix. Most obviously is capitalism.
It's a metaphor
of capitalist exploitation.
In the original trilogy The Matrix, it was all about capitalism as the main message. The machines represented the capitalist world, who have plugged the human race into the machine in order to create their power from them through slavery. The humans in the Matrix story are literally batteries. They're named copper tops because they're being plugged into the Matrix to fuel the capitalist world, and in the same way suppressed. And the idea that being removed or unplugged from the Matrix undoes that suppression and gives you free will against what the capitalism movement is doing to you. This movie, however, being a sequel to a movie trilogy, is more meta in that context, because this movie, in a way, is about this modern trend that every old film from the 80s and 90s has to be rebooted and remade for capitalism. And so, in a way, this movie is a product of capitalism itself.
This cannot be another reboot, retread, regurgitate.
Why not? Reboot self.
And this movie is nothing short of clear about that happening. It is literally a story about capitalism being used to fund capitalism. Most obviously, when Thomas Anderson is plugged back into the Matrix, and his business partner Smith wants to create a fourth Matrix game, Thomas Anderson has a strong compulsion not to do this.
Warner Brothers has decided to make a sequel to the trilogy.
What?
They informed me they're going to do it with or without us.
I thought they couldn't do that.
It in fact leads him to one of his psychotic episodes, because Neo, in the form of Lana Wachowski, is the enemy of capitalism. And by being forced to make a capitalist game, i.e. The Matrix 4, it goes strongly against his programming as a character.
Which I think are great things to keep in mind as you begin working on Matrix 4. And who knows how many more.
Also, the film itself is all about how sequels can never match to the originals. The most prominent part of this metaphor is in the first third of the film when they're having the board meetings trying to create the plot for The Matrix 4, and they discuss what the first Matrix did that this remake has to compete with.
I've got zero tolerance for anything that requires a syllabus and a highlighter. I like my games big, loud, and dumb.
We need guns. Lots of guns. Matrix means mayhem.
Mindless action is not on brand.
She's right. Matrix is mind-born. Philosophy in shiny, tight PVC.
Yeah, ideas are the new sexy.
And this is only solidified by the Matrix character, the Merovingian, turning into what modern kids would call a boomer.
You ruined every suck my silky ass thing! Art, films, books, we're all better! Originality mattered!
And being essentially the negative side of the Matrix Resurrections reviews within the film itself. However, this does have more of a direct capitalism metaphor within The Analyst. The scene particularly where he does the new bullet time. The Analyst explains the equation that came about creating this new Matrix. The metaphor of Neo and Trinity being put back into the Matrix is all about how the capitalist world works.
As long as I managed to keep you close, but not too close, I discovered something incredible.
That if you have an objective and you reach it, you stop being productive to your max because you got what you wanted. Whereas if you get given a possible reward that you never receive, you will always strive to get it. In other words, if you are never given your reward, you'll always work harder to get it. And that is how the Matrix itself works in this fourth film. He also discusses the idea of wanting to get something that you can't have.
Quietly yearning for what you don't have, while dreading losing what you do. For 99.9% of your race, that is the definition of reality. Desire and fear, baby. Just give the people what they want, right?
Saying how the capitalist world doesn't actually need to offer you anything, because you won't want it, even if it's available, for the fear of what will happen. In other words, a leap of faith. And we'll come more into leap of faith later on. The second most obvious metaphor in this story is the trans metaphor. The trans metaphor is always a strong part of the Matrix trilogy. The idea of it being that if you release your mind from its body, you are able to do more than you realise. And that is literally the transgender experience, the idea that your mind and your body are not connected, and that by doing what your mind wants rather than what your body wants, you can be more free to be an individual. However, in this version, the Matrix delves deeper into the trans metaphor with the character of Neo, where he is literally turned into Lana Wachowski. He is creating the Matrix video game, and it makes clear that the transgender metaphor of Neo is Lana herself.
Did you base your main character on yourself?
There is a lot of me in it.
And this is extended further with Trinity this time, being put into Matrix for the first time as Tiffany. If we pause this scene for a moment, and we see Tiffany as she is now, as a pre-transition Lana Wachowski, and we see Trinity in the video game as a post-transition Lana Wachowski, you start to see the trans metaphor come through.
Don't you think she looks like me? You know what he did? He laughed. Like it was a joke. How could it not be, right? Made me so angry.
We see this even further on in the final scene of the film, where Trinity has been unplugged from the Matrix and she encounters the Analyst. The Analyst, in the personification of capitalism, discusses how he treated her dead name Trinity as a joke.
Tiffany?
It was a private joke. An amusement, that's all.
An amusement.
And even brings up the transphobic argument that if people really are transgender, why does it take them so long to transition? And the idea that this devalidates their transition because they should have done it sooner.
If you hated the name so much, why did you heal like a good little bitch so long?
Yeah, definitely asked for that.
After Neo gets unplugged from the Matrix, we see him discussing the Matrix with Bugs, who is the personification of the Matrix fandom. This scene discusses whether the Matrix actually changed anything, because within the context of the film, capitalism is still going on, and the Matrix itself has become a tool for capitalism by the existence of the Matrix 4.
You made it possible and it changed everything.
doesn't feel like it changed anything.
When Neo suggests that the movie didn't change anything, Bugs suggests that the existence of her character, that the audience of The Matrix are now freer, and that the personal experience of the audience is improved, that suggests a success.
But a long time ago, you changed my life.
And that it's not all about winning the war. It's actually about improving people's lives on an individual level. And that is the message of the film overall. This is further extended when Niobe discusses the existence of Io, that machines and humans can work together.
Zion was stuck in the past. They believed that it had to be us or them. This city was built by us and them.
And that is the real meaning of the film, that even though the war hasn't entirely finished, the idea of our side changing, that the machines can actually be good, and it doesn't have to be a black and white issue. There can be different degrees of war and different degrees of peace, and in a way, that is what the success means.
That's what I meant. What you changed that nobody believed could ever be changed. The meaning of our side.
In a way, the character duality can be read here, with Niobe being somebody who is perhaps doubtful of the first film, and realizing that Neo is actually an important figure.
I didn't believe it. I'm ashamed of it now. My pessimism of how long it took me to believe a world without war was possible.
This can be read as a real-world metaphor, with doubters of the transgender movement having to agree that perhaps there is some truth in it, and perhaps that's not a negative thing.
You gave me that. You gave that gift to us all.
And similarly, the machine of Cybebe is the same thing.
Machines are on our side now?
They are Synthians. It's a word they prefer to machines.
Your contact with the Synthian city had a huge impact on the world.
A cisgender, transgender ally. Somebody who is not a human, and somebody who should really be fighting the humans in this narrative, but is actually on their side.
But why?
Not all seek to control, just as not all wish to be free.
And that is the crux of the message of the Matrix trilogy, and particularly in the Matrix Resurrections itself. That failure doesn't mean you've lost the war. Success can mean improvement. Where people have taken a long time to accept the transgender metaphor within the Matrix because the original one was quite subtle, Warner Brothers wouldn't allow them to do a full transgender story, so it had to be disguised. This one takes every move it can to make clear what the metaphor is.
You call this a choice?
Oh, honestly, when somebody offered me these things, I went off of binary conceptions of the world and said that there was no way I was swallowing some symbolic reduction of my life. And the woman with the pills laughed because I was missing the point.
I mean, after all, Thomas Anderson is working in a company called Binary, perhaps suggesting that Neo would be non-binary. And if this wasn't clear enough, there's even the final metaphor where Trinity and Neo, having beaten the system, discuss that they would like to paint the sky with rainbows.
I kind of like the paint the sky with rainbows idea.
Just remind people what a free mind can do.
While I'm on the topic of transgender, I would actually like to bring up the gender itself, because this is clearly a more feminist film than the first time. The character of Neo particularly has been replaced by the character of Trinity. The character of Morpheus has been replaced by the leadership of the character Niobe from the first film. And Jada Pinkett Smith herself said that it's a big movement for an elderly black female to be leading this sort of tribe.
I love that Lana made Niobe older. She is an older woman that is leading this city. You know, she's the OG, and she's honored in that way. It reminded me of cultures in Africa to this day, where the elders are utterly honored.
There's also moments of the Me Too movement being brought up. For example, when Trinity enters the cafe, Thomas Anderson's friend attempts to catcall her and objectify her.
Oh yeah? There she is. Total effing MILF. Daggers. Look, I'm sorry. I'm a geek. I was raised by machines.
Maybe you should go.
And later on in the film, when Neo and Trinity have their meeting in the Simulatic Diner, they discuss about feminism itself and whether women are doing their parental role as mothers and wives because they want to, or because that's what society tells them that's what a woman is.
I remember wanting a family, but was that because that's what women are supposed to want? How do you know if you want something yourself or if your upbringing programmed you to want it?
And finally, I'd like to bring up the bullet time moment, the leap of faith. The film of The Matrix broke new ground. It defined what an action film is, and it defined what the future of filmmaking will be forever. And being The Matrix 4, the filmmakers knew that this would be an important factor.
Allow me to sum up our goal in a single word. Bullet time.
Lana Wachowski knew that the metaphors and the characters and the plot would often be overlooked by most of the filmgoers because they want to see the bullet time.
Allow me to sum up our goal in a single word. Bullet time! Bullet time!
And it makes no mistake that this film understands that idea. But how do you create the new bullet time in a world where everything is possible? How do you create something unexpected when everything is expectable? In the first Matrix film, there is a point where Neo is in his training with Morpheus, and he tries to make him jump off a roof, and he says that when you're ready, you'll be able to do this without falling. And that's when the film ends, with Neo being able to fly. That's when he has become the One. And this film follows that through in a more metaphorical way, with Thomas Anderson keeps jumping off of roofs when he keeps thinking about Neo.
A long time ago, you changed my life. When you leapt off another roof. You leapt. And you never fell.
He also looks out of the window many times and notices a flock of birds. You can see this flock of birds throughout the film all the time. This is seen mostly as a small subplot, just a little bit of metaphor, but then the analyst's speech starts to make more sense.
The key to it all? You. And her. Quietly yearning for what you don't have, while dreading losing what you do. Desire and fear, baby.
And so comes the final act of the film, where Neo and Trinity are cornered on the roof. Their only escape is to jump off the roof. The moment where if they don't, they'll be plugged back into the Matrix. This is literally the moment where it is do or die, the succeeding or the failing of their mission. And so they jump off the roof. And Trinity stops falling. She takes the leap of faith and she succeeds. Both in terms of the capitalist messages and the plot itself, this is the new bullet time. And so, to the final message of the conclusion of The Matrix Resurrections. Where the first film trilogy suggested that Neo had won the war, and therefore everything would end happily ever after, even showing the beautiful skyline inside the Matrix, showing that peace had won. However, the existence of this film proves that that wasn't so, because the Matrix has been rebooted, the Analyst has come into it, and so there is always a possibility that the Matrix will carry on again in some sort of negative form. And so in this film, even though Neo and Trinity won the war with the Analyst, there's a clear sense that the Analyst will still win no matter what happens, because the people don't want to be freed.
You think you hold all the cards because you can do whatever you want in this world.
But here's the thing. The sheeple aren't going anywhere. They like my world.
Recalling back to the first film, where Morpheus says,
"Most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it."
However, even though this suggests that Neo and Trinity can't win no matter what, the evil side will always triumph. This perhaps is an even more positive message than the first time. Because recalling back to the conversation that Bugs has with Neo, where he says that I didn't fix anything, nothing improved.
Doesn't feel like it changed anything. The Matrix is the same or worse.
And Bugs suggests that the improvement of a single life is perhaps a more strong moral message than anything else. This film suggests that we don't want to win, we just want to be free to believe what we believe, to be free to do what we want. And it doesn't have to mean that toppling the entire system is the success, but that actually having the freedom for one person to be allowed to do what they want is the overall success.
Like none of it mattered.
All of it mattered.
that perhaps the Matrix didn't change anything, but the existence of the Matrix at all is a success.
We were on our way to remake your world.
Change a few things.
Kind of like the paint the sky with rainbows idea.
Just remind people what a free mind can do.
I forgot. It's easy to forget.
He makes it easy.
That he does.
And that, in my personal opinion, is the message of the Matrix Resurrections. And so to my conclusion of the Matrix Resurrection review. The Matrix trilogy was one of the most innovative, successful, imaginative, and most discussed film of all time. It was the film that changed what filmmaking is, and everyone has been discussing what could be done to create a new Matrix from then on. The idea that the Matrix 4 was coming had so much pressure behind it. It had to be a film that was a Matrix film. It had to succeed in doing what the previous films did. However, what the previous 3 films did was groundbreaking.
You made it possible, and it changed everything.
How do you create a new film that is both the same as the original Matrix and also innovative? Because now you're expecting to be surprised. This film brings back the original storyline of the Matrix, but it updates it for 2021. It creates a new storyline about people obsessed with phones, obsessed with computer games, obsessed with capitalism, but it also takes it from a standing point that we know what is possible now. We know that capitalism exists, we know that transgender people exist, and we also know the original Matrix trilogy. This film is happy to be what it originally was. It's happy to recycle old ground and be the same storyline, but it does add new touches. It has the new trains, it has the new cast, it has the new storyline.
We're still telling the same stories we've always told, just with different names, different faces.
It has the new looks, but it also has touches of the past. It's not afraid to acknowledge what it was, it's not afraid to acknowledge what it is, and it's not afraid to acknowledge what the audience wants it to be.
What made Matrix different? It F with your head. People want us up in their gray space, switching their synaptic. What the hell is going on here? Light on.
And most of the audience do want it to be just an action-packed, innovative new storyline, like what the original Matrix was, and it does succeed in doing that.
I think people will like, but I actually think that people will really like the directional change that Lana's taken. She's not just tried to make the original film again. Tonally it's different, there are new characters. Yeah, it feels more updated for modern times.
The scenes with the train, the scenes in the dojo, they are incredible new visuals that are beautiful, stunning, and something that you've never seen before.
I don't remember this.
We don't have to run to phone booths anymore either.
The moment particularly with the Smith version of Morpheus, when he's running around the corridors, the bits where Bugs is able to walk on the walls. It's stuff that we've never seen before, and it is absolutely stunning to see. The new bullet time in particular, the scene with the analyst, is incredible. It's just 2 characters in a scene, one of them frozen in time, and one of them moving at super speed. But the way that it's created is nothing like we've ever seen before, and it's absolutely dazzling to the eye. And something else I want to bring up while I'm here is about the way that it is done with old-fashioned technology. Because every modern film now is done on green screens, it's done on CGI. Most films, the actor is barely in the room, and a CGI costume and a CGI set is built around them. And so this is something that Lana Wachowski wanted to avoid, because everyone would be expecting that. You'd be expecting the new Avengers movies with The Matrix 4, but Lana Wachowski wanted to go back to the roots. All the fight scenes, all the sets, all the punches, even most of the seemingly visual effects were all done in camera. The scenes where Neo uses the Force against a debris falling in his face is actually done with practical effects, and simple wire removal and prop removal done in post-production. The scene where the analyst goes into bullet time is actually done with a clever camera technique. There's no green screen or CGI involved at all. And even down to the scene where Neo and Trinity jump off the roof. That wasn't done on green screen or CGI at all. They actually got Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss to jump off a roof. The only CGI involved is removing the wire harness that kept them up. And that's what I think this film does incredibly well. That is what I think is innovative about this film, is it made itself in a blockbuster world where everything is $1 million CGI and no reality, and created 1990s effects with that technology. It doesn't boast CGI or green screen or all this amazing new technology. It does it with the most basic means possible, but creates something we've never seen before. It created the 1990s in modern day. So here is my final TD rating. First off, the positives for the plot, for the characters of Neo and Trinity, and the characters of Bugs and Smith, for the references to the past of the Matrix trilogy, and also the new innovative plot that we were given, and for the self-awareness that those two things are contradictory of each other. The capitalist metaphors and the trans metaphors, and also for the original new look and the ability to create something we'd never seen before, as well as the old-fashioned techniques. My only two criticisms are this. Criticism one is the character of the Merovingian, which, while he is quite a funny character, I feel like he is treated like a parody of the audience rather than in respect to the original Merovingian character, essentially making the Merovingian into a bit of a joke, and I don't particularly like that idea. And secondly, I'd have to give it a little bit of a mark down to the no bullet time, because while I do love the idea of the character jumping off the roof, and I do love the scene with the analyst, I don't think that they put enough effort into beating the original bullet time. I don't think any of the effects really match the original trilogy in the way that we expected, especially given that he references it in the film itself. So my final TD rating is 95 out of 100. If you like this video, drop me a like, let me know what you thought about it in the comments. If you want to see more, subscribe, and follow me on my social media on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. And if you want any more video suggestions, or you want any sort of chat, contact me on my email address. Hope you enjoyed watching, and I'll see you next time.